Welcome back to Accessible Gourmet. Today we're making pork bao. Let's start with the bao dough. So in a small pot, I combined 1/4 cup of whole milk plus 2½ tablespoons of warm water and just heated this up slightly on the stove. To that I've added 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1 tablespoon of neutral oil, as well as 1/2 tablespoon of dry active yeast. We're going to give this a little stir and then set it aside to let it bloom for 5 minutes. If after 5 minutes you don't see any bubbles, then your yeast is probably dead, and so you have to start over with a new package. So into the bowl of a stand mixer, I am adding 1 1/4 cup of all-purpose flour, 1 tablespoon of sugar, 1/4 teaspoon of baking powder, as well as 1/8 teaspoon of salt. We're just going to turn the mixer on low and let the dry ingredients incorporate together. And after 5 minutes and our yeast is bloomed, we're going to add this to the dry ingredients. Once the dough is formed in your bowl, let this knead for 3 to 4 minutes. You can definitely do this by hand because it's not a long kneading process. Once our dough is formed, we are going to cover this with some plastic wrap or a kitchen towel. Pop it into a warm place in our kitchen and let this rest for 2 hours. An hour into our dough resting, we're going to go ahead and start with our pork filling. So I have 2 pounds of pork belly here. I have left the skin on because it makes it easier for me to cut through. It holds everything together and kind of stabilizes this large wiggly chunk of meat as I'm cutting through. So I'm just cutting this into about 1-inch slices. And I am going to take that skin off and about 1/2 inch of the fat. I don't want to leave those on when I cook this. You can if you want to. It's absolutely a preference. I just prefer to take this part off, but don't throw that away if you do take it off. Pop it in the freezer and store it because you can use it to make soup dumplings. Once our strips are a little trimmed, we're going to just chop these into chunks and then throw everything in a bowl once everything is chopped up. And we're going to set this aside until we're ready to use it. We're also going to need 7 cloves of garlic, so we're going to give these a nice little choppity chop up into a nice fine mince. And we're going to set these aside in a small bowl until we're ready to use them. We also need to dice up 1 small onion. This can land in the same bowl as the garlic because they're going to go in at the same time. So if one side's a little bigger, just cut it in half and then cut it into little sections and then give it a nice little choppity chop. Okay, for some reason I did not film how to make this sauce, so I'm going to tell you what I put in it. So 1/8 cup of dark soy, 1/8 of oyster sauce, 1/8 of wild honey, 1/8 of Shaoxing wine, and 1/8 of hoisin sauce, as well as 1/2 cup of broth. I use chicken broth. Just give that a nice mix, and we're going to set this aside until that's ready to go. Now in a heavy bottom pot or a Dutch oven, we're going to add all of our pork belly. We don't need any oil to cook this because that fat is going to render down and there's going to be plenty of fat in the pan, so nothing is going to burn. Give this a nice little stir. We're going to cook this for 20 minutes. After 20 minutes, you can see it's starting to caramelize nicely. We're going to add in all of our garlic and onions. Give this a quick little stir and let this cook for 2 minutes. After 2 minutes, we're going to pour in our sauce and start stirring this around, being sure to scrape up any of the fond that's on the bottom of the pot. Anything that's sticking, we want to get it up off of there because that is flavor and we want to incorporate it into our dish. We're going to let that cook for 2 minutes before we add in 1 cup of water. Give this a little stir. And then we're going to bring this to a boil and let that cook down and reduce for 20 more minutes. Now that our dough is nicely rested, we are going to take it out and roll it out to about 1/4 inch thick. It is a pretty sticky dough, so if you find your rolling pin sticking, just rub it with a little neutral oil and commence rolling. Then I have a 3.5-inch biscuit cutter here that I'm just punching out little circles to form our little bao buns. That literally means buns, but our little bao. So now that our little circles are out, we're going to brush the tops with a little neutral oil. This will keep it from sticking when we steam it in our basket. And we're going to take a chopstick late in the middle of our bun and roll it over, kind of like a little taco. We're going to add these to a parchment lined steamer basket, making sure to leave space in between because these are going to puff up as they cook and we don't want them to stick together. So I just rolled up the rest of my dough and reused it. We're going to steam this for 10 minutes and then we are going to uncover this slightly for 5 minutes. Now I have chopped up some cucumber, daikon, some carrots and cilantro, and stuck that in some ice water while we were waiting for everything to get ready because we wanted to just keep it nice and crispy. So we're just adding some cucumber, our delicious caramelized crispy pork, as well as some vegetables, cilantro, some peppers. I'm being extra fancy here with my little tweezers, but that's it. Little pork bao. They were absolutely delicious. And you can use the dough for other things like Peking duck. So amazing. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked this video, give it a like. If you loved it, subscribe because I put out new videos every Thursday. Until next time, happy cooking.